All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be back. This is Dr. Patrick Lockwood talking about the science of music and wellness. So this concept of music is really, really important, and I think it's a fundamental thing for all of us. However, I would really like to encourage you all to think about it more broadly and yet more specifically as well. One of the things that I want to do before we get going is I want to take care of some housekeeping things. So with regard to the book, The Fear Problem, it's coming out very, very soon. I think we're shooting for March at this point. The cover is almost finished. We are debating two different ideas and making some changes. I think the last round of changes will be done this week. So the cover will be finished, and then the editing will be finished, and then it'll be off to the races. And the book should be out soon. So be on the lookout. The Fear Problem. More updates coming soon. So music and well-being. So why am I talking about music? Well, the reality is, and I'll talk about this more later in the psychology section, but music is perhaps the most powerful adaptation we have as mammals, as humans, for connecting with people and for expressing our feelings. It's one of the most fundamental, powerful things we do outside of having a legit conversation with each other or like punching each other. Another reason I want to talk about music is because it has a lot of implications. How we use music, what music we listen to, and why and what we take from it has a lot of implications for how we deal with ourselves and how we deal with others and how we make meaning of things and how we connect with each other. And finally, our music can help us and it can hurt us. So that's why I'm here talking about this. So let's talk about kind of the psychology of music and kind of what really goes on in our minds and what really goes on in reality whenever we're listening to music, and how does it develop, and what's music like, and what's the preference, and all that stuff. So the research shows that children as early as age 6 have a preference for what we would describe as positive or harmony in music, and less so for what are considered minor keys or kind of dystonian music. Research also shows that our preference for music from childhood through adulthood becomes more and more experience dependent, which means that we're not born with the ideal music in our mind. We're born with a preference for music. We're born with a preference for typically harmonic music. And then based upon our life experience and our emotional development, we come to prefer certain types of music more than the other. And not only is music kind of pleasurable, and I'll talk about that with the brain pathways later, but it also serves a goal. So music is not just something we do that feels good. In fact, what we know from the evolutionary psych research is that a lot of people use their music experiences to enhance their emotional sense of well-being. So this is why, for instance, if you take a look at movies, almost every movie since the 1930s and 40s has a soundtrack of some sort. And even when movies didn't have sound, there was usually someone in the auditorium where the movie was being played back in the 20s, where there was someone playing a piano or some other instrument to kind of accompany the movie that you're seeing. So music enhances our experience of art, and it enhances our ability to feel and connect with the experience that we're going through. So this is why raves are so popular, because we like to feel like we're connected essentially to the experience more. We can't just get together in a crowd and stand there. We're going to dance and we're going to listen to music. Another kind of facet of the research is that people who have what we call dispositional empathy, so a strong theory of mind, are more likely to be able to get into music as opposed to people who are more linear, who are not as empathic. They don't get into music as much. They still like music a lot, but they don't necessarily get into music. Another interesting finding from the psych research is that, generally speaking, listening to what we call relaxing music, like classical music or meditation music or soothing music actually lowers our stress response better than just sitting in silence. So I hope all that makes sense. So one more thing, kind of from the evolutionary psych perspective. So when we talk about things from the evolutionary psych perspective, we're talking about what's the function of our behavior, right? So what the research shows is that when we listen to music or when we play music or when we sing, what we're doing is we're attempting to connect with people and we're attempting to express emotions with someone about an important situation. So similar to how like we might cry when we fall and hurt ourselves, right? That's a very intentional communication that we are going through. It's an expression of emotion. It's the same thing when we're listening to music or singing music or playing music. We're trying to communicate a very powerful emotion about an important experience. So some of the songs that you all like the most probably are ones that relate to like relationships and breakups and feeling powerful, stuff like that, where you're listening to this music because you went through a breakup, or you're listening to this music because you didn't feel powerful. So we're going to listen to that music, sing that music so that we can feel that way or communicate our emotions to someone else. So then we come to the problem of defining like music and emotions and what real feelings does music activate. So is it just music activates happiness or sadness or whatever? So in the psychology research, there are many articles. I could have cited at least 30 or 40 more, but of the ones that I found, there basically are a bunch of different ways that people break it down. So some researchers break down music and emotion by whether or not people feel happy, sad, or fearful based upon the song and the content and the lyrics. Whereas other researchers break down music research into whether or not the music we're listening to arouses us, kind of activates us, or kind of puts us down, or whether or not it has a certain positive or negative tone. So they break it down that way. However, for me, I didn't really kind of connect with those kind of terms in those research. I thought that was too complicated. So the most intuitive study I found kind of lumps music and emotionality into 3 categories. So the first category is what they call sublimity or feeling sublime. So in this category of feeling sublime when we're listening to music are experiences like feeling wonder or feeling transcendence or feeling peacefulness or feeling nostalgia or feeling tenderness. They lump all those things together underneath the word sublime. So we can have a sublime experience when we listen to music. So happy songs or peaceful songs or songs about like the wonder of love or whatever. That would be the sublime category. The second way they break it down is they talk about what could broadly be described as vitality. So that encompasses things like joy and things like power. So you've all listened to like a song where it's like, yeah, I'm going to overcome the day, blah, 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 blah. Or let's see, what else? So here's a good one. So there's a great band I like called ZZ Top, and they've got this famous song called Sharp Dressed Man. That's basically all about having power and being able to flirt with women and get attention and be the hot guy, the sharp dressed guy. That's a vitality song. It's got a kind of a bumping bass line and guitar line, and the lyrics are very power oriented. So this research would describe it as a vitality song, a sense of vitality in the feelings. The third way that they classify music is whether it gives us a sense of unease or not. So a sense of unease is like a sense of tension or a sense of sadness. Those are the 2 subcategories. So we've all listened to like, a Sarah McLachlan song or, a sad popular music song where it's like, we feel really bad, or those poor animals, or why doesn't this person love me? And we're very sad and longing. That would be kind of an unease. So you can take this model, this framework, and you can use it to kind of pick your music appropriately for your mood. So if you're really looking to like amplify your sense of power and joy, you should listen to a powerful song like Sharp Dressed Man. If you're looking to deal with your sense of unease, your sense of tension and sadness, you might want to listen to a Sarah McLachlan song. If you want to listen to a song that helps you feel peaceful or nostalgic, you might want to listen to something like As Time Goes By Perry Como. where you can kind of fondly think of a love from the past, right? It's not sad, it's not powerful, it's just fond. So that's sublime. So you can kind of categorize your music and choose it wisely. You can even create a playlist for sublime, a playlist for vitality, and a playlist for unease, so that you have a go-to every time you want to deal with these feelings and cope, essentially. So I hope all that makes sense. It's just one framework for looking at it. There are other frameworks, but it's the one that kind of resonates the most with me and makes the most sense based upon how they grouped things. So let's talk about the brain, because I think brain's very, very important. And I think, you know, the reality is, if we have a sense of agency, a sense of power about how we function and what's going on with us, we might be able to, you know, do more and understand ourselves better. I think that's really important. So with regard to the brain, music activates all sorts of brain areas. Just almost every part of our brain is activated in some way. The parts that are activated the most in the brain are the parts of the brain responsible for motivation, responsible for emotion, and responsible for arousal. So these are things like the ventral striatum, the midbrain, the amygdala, the orbitofrontal cortex, the hypothalamus, nucleus accumbens, the insula, the cingulate cortex, and the medial prefrontal cortex. These are all parts of the brain responsible for motivation, arousal, emotion, and you know, kind of a sense of purpose and reward. Honestly, it's some of the very similar parts to the addiction parts of the brain. So there's an interesting set of studies that shows that kind of the rhythmic nature of music will operate unconsciously or automatically to make us want to move. So like, there's a good reason you don't want to dance by yourself when you start listening to that song you love, or you go to a club or you start dancing. The music is part of what's quote unquote moving you, because it's activating the motivation and emotion parts of the brain, the arousal parts of the brain. Another interesting finding from the neuroscience research is that our reward areas in the brain, so like the addiction areas of the brain, actually light up more strongly for familiar music, whereas unfamiliar music doesn't light them up as much. We still feel feelings, we are still activated, but if it's familiar, if it really is meaningful to us, it activates one of those 9 feelings I described earlier, broken into 3 categories, then it's going to light us up more and activate us more. So one of the neuroscientists in one of the studies described kind of the process of how music happens in the brain very well. So I'm just going to direct quote this author named Kolsch, K-O-E-L-S-C-H. So Kolsch said, emotions are understood here to be the result of integrated activity of affect systems, like affect-generating brain systems such as the brainstem, the diencephalon, the hippocampus, and the orbitofrontal cortex, and emotional effector systems that affect our emotions. So like the peripheral arousal systems, the motor systems, the action tendencies, and all that good stuff. Information from the affect systems and sensory information resulting from the activity of the effector systems, the motor systems, which is interoceptive, what does it feel like in my body, is synthesized into an emotion precept. So it all combines. A pre-verbal subjective feeling before we even think about it, which is represented in areas such as the insular cortex, in the higher up, our cingulate cortex, and secondary somatosensory cortex. So it goes from here to here, so less conscious, more physical, primal feeling to here. And then he says an emotion percept can be reconfigured into a symbolic code, such as language, right? So it's moving up until we consciously appraise it and deal with it and feel with it. Then our conscious appraisal, possibly related to neural activity in Brodmann's area 7, can regulate and modulate, and to a certain extent even initiate, activity of emotion systems and effector systems, and perhaps even neural activity associated with emotion. So the functional interconnections of the brain structures involved in affect, emotion systems, and effector systems, motor systems, language, or conscious appraisal are not yet well understood, but they seem to all work together in emotion. So basically this understanding from Kolsch is that music affects us auditorily, and it gets into the bottom parts of our brain, starts to activate us physiologically, and as it moves further up the brain, we go from more unconscious ways of responding and feeling and thinking and acting to more conscious ways of feeling, thinking, and acting. And our language areas, our perceptual areas, our behavioral areas, our motor areas, our motivation, and our feeling areas all work together when we feel and listen to music. So all sorts of parts of the brain are involved, right? It's good to know that. It's good to know that we're going to have a physiological primal response to music, and we can integrate that upwards and backwards with our cognitive process, our ability to understand and use it. So the more we understand how certain things make us tense up, so certain songs make you tense up. That might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. Certain songs might make you think more, make you more introspective. That might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. You need to think about that. So that's just that. Finally, so how does music help us develop a better sense of wellness or well-being? So my final kind of argument to you guys is that music can really help us therapeutically. And there's a lot of research since, I mean, it's been going on since the 60s, but there's a lot of research since at least the 90s about how music helps in therapy and in the world of medicine. So the first point I want to make is music helps us by allowing us to express ourselves, which leads to an enhanced general sense of I'm good, well-being. Secondarily, music works by increasing a sense of motivation and pleasure, which I described earlier. And secondarily, as a result of that increased motivation and pleasure, we have decreased stress and arousal, which indirectly affects our immune system. It actually kind of decreases inflammatory responses in our body when we listen to pleasing, motivating, activating music, which in turn increases social behavior. So it makes us more pro-social. The more music we listen to, typically the more pro-social we become. And let's use an example. So all of us know what like death metal is and hard rock is. And everyone seems to associate death metal and hard rock with like being angry, nasty people. But there was one study out of France, ironically, that showed they went and they surveyed a bunch of people at concerts, at like metal, heavy metal, death metal concerts. And what they found was those people who went to those concerts actually had lower negative affect and better social adjustment compared to the regular person they surveyed, compared to control groups. So even if you listen to nasty, angry Marilyn Manson kind of music, you actually are probably dealing with your emotions directly, congruently with how you feel, which means you feel less stressed by them, which means you're more positive after listening to that music. That's just one study, but it kind of proves the point though. A third point from the research is that music decreases anxiety and pain. So there's a lot of medical research for people that are recovering from cancer and surgeries and chronic pain. And it shows that people who consistently listen to soothing music or positive music, kind of that sublime music described earlier, using those three categories, have less pain and less anxiety. And that makes sense from the brain perspective because, again, music activates our opiate system and our dopamine system. It activates our sense of feeling good, our sense of feeling safe, and our sense of feeling powerful and active in seeking out things. Here's a fourth thing from the research. Music works for kids with behavioral problems, not necessarily for their emotional problems, but their behavioral problems, which is fascinating. Basically, what the research shows is that kids with behavioral problems, acting out, ADHD kind of problems, it works like an emotional outlet, so the behavior gets in line. So it calms people down. It might calm someone with autism or ADHD down enough because it's activating these parts of the brain that their emotions are not so extreme that they have to physically act them out anymore to get some validation and get some calm. So basically, it doesn't fix, listening to music is a coping skill. It doesn't fix the underlying cognitive and emotional issues that make kids act out behaviorally, but it does give them enough of an outlet by activating those brain areas I talked about earlier so that they don't have to act out as much. So it's a good what we call adjunctive treatment. There's some research that listening to sublime music, so that peaceful, calming, loving music, actually helps with people getting to sleep better and sleeping through the night better. That's cool. And there's lots and lots and lots, finally, sixth point, lots of research on music therapy as an adjunct for recovery in hospitals, long-term illnesses, and long-term care facilities, specifically for cancer and for heart attacks. So the rhythmic nature of music can actually decrease our sense of internal frustration and chaos, decrease our anxiety, decrease our pain, and it actually decreases our inflammatory immune response. And because it's so rhythmic, it can actually help with the post-recovery from heart attacks. It can kind of get your heart into a rhythm, which is fascinating. So this is the research on music. I hope all this makes sense, and I hope you found it useful. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or check out the research on the Patreon. I'm going to post that here in about 5 minutes or so. And I look forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks. Just keep in mind The Fear Problem, my new book, is coming out in about a month or so. We're on the way. Everything's going well. So again, good to talk to you all. Hope this was helpful, and I will see you all soon in 2 weeks. Have a good day.